So I want to start my introduction of our next speaker by giving you a little bit of instruction, and maybe it's just because I always wanted to be a teacher. And that is, when you listen to him and when you engage in conversations over the course of these sets of panels, we're really looking to you this afternoon to be identifying what are the things that cities and regions ought to be doing on this topic, and what are the things that need further research? What are the things that need further inquiry and development? What frameworks do we need? What tools do we need going forward? And we're going to ask that question again and again as we go through the panels. The first panel will be on equity and access, but I think that you will find that there are common threads that are going to run through all of these, whether the transformative impacts on other sectors, how will transit be affected, whether it will be more of a benefit, and how do we get the benefits and safety and access. And so to start this conversation, we have Jeff Tumlin, who is the Director of Strategy for Nelson Nygaard, who has really given a lot of thought to the question of how do we deal with these effects of this transportation? How do we sort of wrap our heads around the transformative effect? And I'm going to steal one of your lines, which is that, you know, when we converted from from horses and buggies, we called cars horseless carriages, and we tended to sort of get stuck in that old paradigm. And I think the challenge to us is to get unstuck as we look at automated vehicles and mobility, rather than thinking of them as being driverless cars. And with that, Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you to really stir us up and get us going. Thank you.
So who would have thought a year ago that I would be spending my time at automotive technology conferences, right? Crazy. And yet they're really fun, and also really, really scary. But there's also another aspect of them, which is, you know, when you go to these conferences, like all the people there think all of this is brand new and exciting. And it's really not at all. Hyperloop was first patented in 1867. And almost everything that we're imagining in this world of, over there, in this world of new mobility and new cities was basically all completely imagined in the 1933, 39, and 64 World's Fair exhibits called Futurama, sponsored by the General Motors Corporation. By far the most visited industrial exhibits in the history of the world. And amazing, right? Complete new vision of the city of the future with a chicken in every pot and a General Motors car in every garage. And since the 1950s, all of the detail, at least theoretically, of autonomous vehicle technology was basically worked out, and people believed that it was just around the corner. So this is from 1957. And of course, the vision today, the technology is kind of the same. The only thing that is different is, of course, the board game in the car. Whoops, there we go. Come on. The board game has been replaced, by the video console, and you'll notice also the children are gone, and the product design is by Apple Computer, and the people are sort of vaguely multi-ethnic, right? But other than that, like the technology is kind of the same. So what does this mean? Well, autonomous vehicles are real, and it is true that there are a lot of problems that they can solve, and I'm hopeful about them. So, there's over 30,000 Americans a year die because we let distracted humans hurl themselves at each other in 2-ton, death suits, right? It's insane. Like, the safety benefits are pretty significant. The fact that, in most of our cities, about 30% of our land area is parking, about 80% of parking demand goes away. Profound change in the economy of cities. There is, yes, at least on the highway, and particularly for freight, some significant space efficiency improvements that we can get by cramming cars closer together. So, good. And lots of interesting things happening in terms of first and last mile connectivity, particularly important as we suburbanize poverty and dramatically increase mobility costs for low-income households and deny them paths out of poverty. And also really useful for people with disabilities and children and seniors who today have significantly limited mobility options. We can really improve those stuff, right? So good. But one thing that autonomous vehicles will not do, although it's been much promised to us, is somehow solve the traffic congestion problem, right? A little bit more efficiency, but autonomous vehicles are no different than adding another lane to the highway to solve our congestion problem, because congestion is not an infrastructure or a technology problem. Congestion is an economic problem and is only susceptible to economic solutions. So no, we do not like congestion. It makes us sad. We demand that the roadway gets widened. We make a big investment in widening the roadway. And what happens? It changes people's behavior. It also changes land value. And I would argue that our primary business in the transportation world is not mobility. The business that we are in is rearranging and creating land value. And so with faster driving, it means, oh, honey, why don't we move to that bigger, cheaper house farther away because we can still get to our jobs in the same amount of time. Faster driving means more people drive, which means you have congestion, and the spiral continues circling around, and yet we somehow believe that, oh, just one more lane this time will finally solve our congestion problem. And if that doesn't work, well, autonomous vehicles. And, well, if that doesn't work, we'll just put the cars in the sky, right? No, we're not going to solve the traffic congestion problem. In fact, we may greatly exacerbate it as we unleash levels of induced demand we've never seen before, in part by reducing the financial cost of mobility, but more importantly, eliminating the time cost. Because if you're in your Google RV with the waterbed and the entertainment console and right the racquetball court right in your car, why not live 3 hours away from your work? So another great concern that we have is the urban efficiency of our transportation systems, right? Traffic capacity is a limited renewable resource. And in cities, it's all about the geometric efficiency of how we use our streets. It takes about 10 times as much space to move somebody in a car than on a bike, on foot, in a bus, in a train, any other mode of transportation. I love driving, but I know every time I get in my car, I displace 9 other people who are not able to use the transportation system. And whether you're driving alone in a car or in an Uber with a driver or in the Uber without the driver, you're still taking up the same amount of space. And Bruce Schaller's research in New York City has shown that New York City has been losing about 10% of its bus ridership every year since 2014, largely as a result of Uber and Lyft being a lot more convenient and door-to-door than sitting outside in the 100-degree humidity or sleet waiting for the public bus. New York City's transportation system is moving fewer and fewer people each year, even as New York is growing and the demand on the transportation system is getting greater. And this is not because cars are bad, it's because of their geometric inefficiency, an inefficiency that autonomous vehicles already are starting to unleash on our cities simply as a result of Uber and Lyft. And of course, don't get me started about the public health outcomes of ubiquitous door-to-door mobility. Why ever walk if your Google Pod will take you from every door to every door? And if that's happening, why not reduce the sidewalk widths or eliminate some crosswalks so that we can fit more autonomous Uber vehicles into our cities? And just as happened in the late 1920s and early 1930s, when General Motors and AAA criminalized walking for the first time, because that was necessary in order to create more speed in cities, which was necessary to sell more cars. Autonomous vehicles still are struggling with the urban stop sign controlled intersection. And why would anyone wait like an idiot at the corner for the green light when it's hot and humid or cold and sleety, when you know that the autonomous vehicle safety protocol will automatically stop for you if you step into the street. Further criminalization of walking on our current trajectory is inevitable because the autonomous vehicle system will not work in cities without it. Pop quiz. Who's investing the most in autonomous vehicle technology? You all know this. Who? Google. Google. What's Google's revenue model? They sell information, right? What is their revenue model?
They just search. Advertising.
Advertising. 95% of Google's parent company, Alphabet, 95% of their revenue is advertising. So why is this information and data company investing in autonomous vehicle technology? Why would this be, like they do search. Why are they the ones that are investing? Well, it's because the autonomous vehicle will be by far the most powerful medium for advertising in the history of advertising. And the technology is already there, right? If the driver no longer needs to pay attention to the road, and the vehicle knows who the occupants are, it knows where they are, where they're going, and they're trapped. And the vehicle, of course, has the occupant's credit card information, right? The only thing you're going to pay for in the future of mobility is to turn the friggin' ads off. Right? This is the Minority Report vision of the future. And imagine the social implications of this. So in addition to being completely inundated by ads at all time, you can exclude traveling with certain people. So, I only travel with people with a 4.5 star rating or better. Or I only travel with people of my ethnicity. The technology companies can make money off of our social preferences. So why not never interact with somebody different than you are or less than you are? And the technologists are excited by this prospect. Go to their conferences. And look at their cost models, right? The Kinsey Institute has done some great analysis of the finances of the future of mobility, and that gets even scarier because it means that many of the things that we take for granted today, like public transit, are at risk unless public transit takes the lead. So another thing that's funny at these auto conferences is just, as Kelly was saying about the, this thinking that all this is a horseless carriage. Automotive manufacturers don't realize that their product has radically changed. They've been relying since the 1920s on selling a commodity based upon a myth that purchasing a car brings you freedom and autonomy and social status and sex. That myth dies the minute the steering wheel goes away. If there's no steering wheel, there's no delusion of control. And what they haven't realized yet is that the product for autonomous vehicles is not an object, nor is it even mobility. The only people who are going to make money off of autonomous vehicles are those who recognize that the product is time. When you no longer have to pay attention to the road, you're either going to be sold ads or you're going to have bundled services that take advantage of this time that you've got and allow you to make some productive use of it. So I'll let you just think about what that means. Let's talk about other implications of autonomous vehicle technology. So massive induced demand, horrific sprawl, 3-hour commutes. Yeah, that's all easily imaginable. But what about the financial impact on cities? So autonomous vehicles need to be electric because electric vehicles can recharge themselves. Gas-powered vehicles can't. So gas tax revenue drops to zero. Parking revenue drops to zero. If you're a suburban community and you're dependent upon commodity retail sales tax, commodity retail is gone. And Nico Larco will talk a little bit more about this later. In addition, dealing with the public health impacts and the social dislocation impacts, really profound on cities. And that is very much the current trajectory that we're on, despite some of the utopian models. For transit agencies, we're predicting that about 10 years from now, the suburban transit operators will all go bankrupt, and there's nothing that we can do to save that, and that may be fine. But in cities, if urban transit operators go bankrupt and all urban bus service is handed over to autonomous Uber, that is pretty catastrophic, both from an urban mobility standpoint, but also very much from a social equity standpoint, particularly on the current trajectory where the technologists are basically all libertarians and don't really care about people of limited means or who have been excluded in some ways. But there's an alternative model, assuming we're allowed the regulatory environment to make it work. And that is recognizing that the reason autonomous vehicles are going to succeed, unlike other technologies, is that they're able to take advantage of all of our existing infrastructure. They take advantage of public street rights of way, which are owned by the public. If the public wakes up and realizes the necessity of managing that public right of way for the public good and not just for private profit, we have hope for steering the technology along a different trajectory. But it means that the federal government and state governments need to define the regulatory range that municipalities have to manage their roads. A regulatory authority that was taken away from cities in the late 1920s and the 1930s by AAA and General Motors as they went to each state legislature and took this authority away. It needs to be given back. And what this means is the street needs to be managed. An advantage of autonomous vehicle technology is they allow us to recognize finally that congestion is an economic problem, and the only way to solve that is by treating roadway capacity as a limited resource and pricing it. You don't have to, build 19th century toll booths. The pricing can be built in to mobility as a service, and it can vary based upon time of day congestion levels, and most importantly, it can vary based upon the efficiency of the vehicle. What we need to charge for is empty seats and empty cargo space in order to incentivize the most space-efficient use of our streets. And this has to be done at the municipal level. It also needs to be done at the municipal level to replace all of that lost revenue. Basically, all of the revenue that we're using for funding our infrastructure, all of that is going away. This is the model to replace it as well as to make our cities work. So what do we need to be doing? Right now, because of Uber and Lyft, all cities need to be smarter about managing the curb. This is one area where cities actually do have, today, all the authority that they need. Start thinking about the curb as the interface between AVs and the outside world, and start eliminating the conflicts between Uber and Lyft and cyclists and buses. It's time to eliminate minimum parking requirements. All cities have vastly more parking today than they will ever need. Why would you ever force the private market to build more parking than the market warrants? Get rid of this stuff. Like, why are we still having this conversation? Establish data protocols. This is something that NACTO has really stepped it up on and is getting cities to collude with each other in order to demand better data for managing the street from those private operators like Uber and Lyft that are profiting from the public realm. Critically important, and we'll talk about this later, we need to friggin' define what we mean by equity and align our equity goals with our budgeting, our data protocols, and our reporting back to the public. We need to get real about this, and it is possible to now. But it means not taking a libertarian attitude about technology, but an attitude around opportunity for all. We're also going to need to do a little bit of government reorganization. Transit agencies are a failed business model. And municipalities are going to need to take a lot more leadership around transit issues than they currently do, either by directly partnering with public transit agencies or by subsuming those services within municipal government. It also means that cities and MPOs need to work together in order to really foster mobility as a service in a way that achieves the public good. Transit, if it hopes to survive, has to lead. The areas that are most ripe for autonomous vehicle technology are rural highways and freight, but also urban bus rapid transit. Constrained environment, we've got the computing technology right now in order to basically map bus rapid transit corridors in 3 dimensions. It's the place where we need to start, but it also means we need to get very, very serious about all the jobs that are going to be displaced as a result of autonomous vehicle technology. If transit does not lead on this topic now, not only will those jobs be lost, but so will the pensions of public agency workers. So being conscious, partnering with labor, and being conscious about this transition, if we start that now, we can ensure that nobody loses their job or their pension. If we delay, it's actually the worst case scenario and far worse for labor. But more importantly, we all need to get better at telling stories about the city of the future. Right now, our elected officials are distracted by shiny objects. The technology companies are thinking 20 and 30 years ahead, whereas most of us are stuck thinking about the present, thinking, oh yeah, this will be fun, like it's my iPhone upgrade, yay, and not really using game theory to think through the unintended negative consequences. In the 1920s and 1930s, we went through the exact same period in American history where we didn't think through the unintended negative consequences of the arrival of the automobile. Let us please be smarter about the unintended consequences this time. And I look forward to the conversation on all of these topics as we move forward today. Thank you.